All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to the Out and Up. I'm your host, Matt Lowe, and today I'm pleased to be joined by Chris Gordy, who does a great podcast locked on SEC. So I've talked college football with him for years. It's always a pleasure. What's up, Chris? How you doing?
What's going on, Matt? It is that exciting time of year, man. No more prognostications and predictions and my top five quarterbacks. All that's out the window. Now we finally get actual games to discuss.
Yes, we do. And for guys like me and you, this is like Christmas morning come tomorrow and Friday and Saturday and Sunday and Monday. Uh,
Definitely.
Wanted to jump right into this. The SEC, of course, Alabama is the lead dog in the SEC West. I think they're clearly the top team in the country entering the season. And of course, you got Georgia in the East. I mean, I really don't think they're going to take too much of a step backward. I think their offense is probably going to be a lot better this year. What's your take on this SEC West race in general? And do you think somebody has a shot at upsetting Alabama and winning the West?
Yeah, I just kind of did my SEC standings predictions this week on my show, and the way I kind of did it was, I just kind of predicted records for each team. Now, I could have done the whole thing where I ran through every game and predicted win-loss and win-loss, but I think it's just easier to say, this seems like this team could go 9-3, or this seems like this team could go 10-2, or whatever. So that's kind of how I took the angle of it. But when I look at it, it feels to me, Matt, like we've talked so much this offseason about how good the quarterback play is going to be in the SEC this year when you got so many good guys coming back. You got the Heisman Trophy winner in Bryce Young. You got the unsung hero in Stetson Bennett, who just won the national championship for Georgia, yet he still is like, people discount him and don't think he's very good, but it is what it is. Then you got Hendon Hooker at Tennessee, who was outstanding last year. I can't see any reason why he wouldn't get better in another year of Josh Heupel's system. Will Levis is kind of that guy at Kentucky that people are expecting is going to make that big leap this year. KJ Jefferson at Arkansas is a gamer. And then you got this whole group of guys. I mean, Will Rogers, all he does is just, be top 5, top 10 in the country in passing in the Mike Leach offense at Mississippi State. I have high hopes for Haynes King at A&M. I thought he was going to be very good last year before he got hurt. TJ Finley's a guy who's very talented, who can, I think if everything clicks this year, he can perform well at Auburn. And Spencer Rattler is a guy who was a year ago preseason Heisman favorite at Oklahoma, and now he's at South Carolina. And don't forget Anthony Richardson of Florida, tremendous. And then Mike Wright, who just put up 63 points on Hawaii last week for Vanderbilt. I say all that to say you can't have all that talent, all that just bevy of great quarterback play, and expect teams to go undefeated, because it's in the SEC, as we know, like somebody's going to get you when you're down. Somebody's going to get you when you're not playing your best, and it happens every year in this league. And so that's why my prediction, at least for the top of this conference, is I think Alabama's going to slip up and lose a game along the way, and I think Georgia's going to slip up and lose a game along the way. I think they'll both still win the SEC East and SEC West and meet Atlanta. But I think what's going to happen is, with 2 one-loss teams playing for the SEC title, the winner will win the SEC, obviously, and go to the playoff. And I think the loser gets left out, because I think this is a year we won't get 2 SEC teams into the playoff. Now, if we want to break it down and run through where do those teams lose, Alabama, I think, road trips at Arkansas, at Tennessee, and at Ole Miss, I think are all potential pitfalls for Alabama. And I know people are like, Tennessee, really? Look, I know it's been 15 years since Tennessee's beat Alabama, but man, doesn't it feel like it's about that time, right? Like it's getting closer and closer to happening. Lane Kiffin falls into that category of, I asked somebody, Jimbo broke through last year, Kirby broke through. Who's the next former Saban assistant that can beat him? Lane Kiffin could be the next one. And then, of course, Sam Pittman only gets better and better. That home field advantage at Arkansas could be a rocket atmosphere that Bama walks into. So I'm not saying they're going to lose all 3 of those. I'm just saying I think one of those road trips, Bama just gets caught napping, ends up playing a closer game than they want to, and they end up getting beat.
Yeah, Chris, it's like you said. I mean, the West in particular is such a grinder. It's a little bit more easier if you're in the East right now to maybe run the table or come out with one loss. But the West, to me, I mean, it just seems like this is going to be, it's like you said, I mean, because you look at a Mississippi State team, Will Rogers, and the way they play defense and that system. If they're hot one day, and I think Rogers is a great player, I think he's somewhat underrated. If they're hot and that offense is clicking, and everybody says Mike Leach is a goofball and all this and that, but the guy's a good football coach, and that's a team that they're very dangerous to me. And like you said with Arkansas, I mean, with Bumper Pool there, middle linebacker, KJ Jefferson, the way they run the ball and they're physical, they can beat you at any time. So it's going to be interesting to see, what happens and how this shakes out. And then you look at a team like Ole Miss, the back end of their schedule is brutal. It is brutal, the same as Auburn. I mean, that's why it's imperative for Auburn to get out to a quick start, which I think they could be a surprise team potentially if they could get the quarterback play settled. And I think Robbie Ashford is a guy to watch out for there for. But I'm like you, Chris, when it comes to Tennessee, the way these guys put up points, and Hendon Hooker's a player, I think that's a team that could potentially win 9 games.
Yeah, the biggest Achilles heel for Tennessee is that defense. I was talking with some people close to the program. They think that this is a year that defensive front really takes a step forward, and we start to see more of a pass rush up front. They have a weakness in the secondary. Obviously, Trey Flowers very good at safety, but outside of him, who's going to be that guy to step up? Some people think that Jalen McCullough or Warren Burrell or one of those guys is going to step up and have a big year. But it starts up front. I can cover a bad secondary if I'm getting after it up front. And Tyler Barron and Byron Young are wreaking havoc, and they're getting sacks and they're getting pressure on opposing quarterbacks. But I look at it almost as, remember, Matt, the game last year, the Tennessee-Kentucky game that was basically a shootout. Each team, every time he gave them the ball, they were going down the field and scoring points. I think Tennessee's going to have to win a lot of games this year that way. I think it's going to be shootouts, last one with the ball wins. But that said, Tennessee can win games that way. So, that's why I think the Vols are a sneaky 9-3 type season. And if all goes right, maybe even 10-2. And we're talking about them as maybe an at-large team getting into a Sugar Bowl.
Yeah, I just think, with their offense, I mean, they're gonna be in games. I mean, and it's one of those things too. I mean, I kind of remember the Indianapolis Colts under Peyton Manning and the way they used to score points. And if they got up on you like 14 or 17 points, and then they had, Dwight Freeney and Mathis coming off you off the edge there. I mean, that was you just ate right into what they wanted to do. And I think, but Josh Heupel, to me, I mean, what he did last year with that program, half the team left, and everybody thought they were going to be terrible. I thought he did a job last year, and it's good for the SEC when Tennessee's good.
It certainly is, and there's a lot of the traditions. I mean, look, when we talk about things are going to change here these next couple of years, right? With Texas and Oklahoma coming in, a lot of people are wondering how are they going to do the schedule. I think Chris Lowe of ESPN said it sounds like they're going to do the 3-6 model, where you're going to have your 3 permanent rivalry games, and then you're going to have 6, mix them up kind of games. And with that talk is people start talking about, well, what traditions are we going to lose? Are we going to lose the Iron Bowl? Are we going to lose Auburn, Georgia? Are we going to lose Bama, Tennessee? And I know, for a lot of the younger people out there, Alabama, Tennessee has been not a competitive game for much of the last 10, 15 years. There's been a couple close ones in there, but it's been a one-sided rivalry that Bama has really dominated. But no, I mean, I think that's where a lot of people look at it and say, if Tennessee can be good and can compete in those games again, it could compete. And we're not just talking about Georgia's a shoe-in in the East every year. Kirby's building something over there, but man, somebody's got to put up a fight. And whether that's Shane Beamer recruiting at a high level at South Carolina, whether that's, Mark Stoops at Kentucky, who just keeps getting better and better, it seems like, always going to be feisty, always going to have a good defense. If Billy Napier is going to be the guy to turn Florida back into a true power, that's left to be seen. But yeah, it seems like Josh Heupel has been the right guy so far at Tennessee. And, as a friend of mine who's a Tennessee fan put it, man, look, we'd love to compete. We'd love to win, but we're just thankful to be entertaining again, because for a while there, it wasn't even fun to watch. It was painful to watch Jared Garantano play quarterback.
Yeah. And you mentioned Mark Stoops. I mean, what a remarkable job this guy has done at Kentucky, and the consistency that he's done it with. I mean, these guys, they're turning out NFL picks year after year after year now. And you have to wonder, when is it going to come the time where he gets a huge job? I mean, and like Notre Dame or, someplace like that. I mean, you just have to wonder when that's going to come.
Well, he was a finalist for the LSU job. And I know if Brian Kelly had come back and told LSU no, I think we'd be talking about LSU head coach Mark Stoops right now. Now, it wouldn't have been a sexy hire for the fan base. I had a lot of LSU fans telling me, no, that you don't hire the Kentucky coach. And I started to say, all right, well, let's pump the brakes here. You just went 6-7 last year at LSU. Like you need something better than what you've had these last couple of years as Ed Ogeron kind of took a nosedive after the championship season. You can do a lot worse than Mark Stoops. I think he's a heck of a coach. He recruits at a high level. His defenses are always strong, always going to have a good ground game, running attack. Chris Rodriguez, it looks like he's going to be suspended a couple games to start this year, but once he gets back, he's going to be the straw that stirs the drink. And then Will Levis is the one that everybody looks at, and there are comparisons being made. Now, he's not going to be Joe Burrow on the field, but people are saying, can he have that Joe Burrow-like rise this year, meaning a guy that came in as a transfer, looked pretty good in his first year, but people are wondering, can he take that next step, take his game to the next level? And if you go back 2018 Joe Burrow, at the end of that year, we were looking back at it going, okay, he was fine at LSU. It was an upgrade at quarterback, but it wasn't like lights out, oh my God. 2019 was lights out, oh my God, with Joe Burrow at LSU. Some people are saying maybe we could see a little bit of that from Will Levis at Kentucky this year. And if he does, man, he's going to make himself a top 10 NFL draft pick.
I never will forget being at SEC Media Days and being around Joe Burrow. And he said, I'm going to throw, he said something like, I'm going to throw for 50 touchdowns this year and we're going to win a lot of games. And he did it. And I was like, dude. But I mean, wow.
People laughed at him when he said that,
I mean, I was like, man, who does this guy think he's a big boy too, up close though. I mean, he's a big guy. I mean, and he reminds me a lot of Tom Brady. I don't know what it is about him, the way he moves in the pocket and throws the deep ball and his moxie. He's just a really good player. But speaking of LSU, Brian Kelly comes in. I think he hired two great coordinators in Mike Denbrock and Matt House. Of course, Denbrock came from Cincinnati, where he had, what's the quarterback?
Desmond Ridder, yeah.
Desmond Ridder. And, they go out and get Jaden Daniels in the transfer portal from Arizona State. Of course, he hasn't announced a quarterback starter yet, but I think all roads lead to Daniels. I mean, I remember watching the kid play as a true freshman, and I was really impressed. He's a good player, and he's a guy that I think with the capability with his legs, I think he's got to be the guy. I mean, what are you hearing about that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Jaden Daniels, but I think we're going to see both guys play. They're very high on Garrett Nussmeier. Garrett Dellinger is their center. Garrett Nussmeier is the quarterback. Nussmeier he's a gunslinger. He's a little bit like, and again, when we throw names around, I'm not saying he's Brett Favre. I'm saying he's got the Brett Favre mentality of he ain't afraid to let it sail down the field. Sometimes that's bad. Sometimes it results in interceptions. Sometimes you hit your wide receiver right in the numbers and he's scoring a touchdown. So they like that about Nussmeier. But when this was still a 3-horse race before Miles Brennan decided to quit football, I kept thinking it was going to be Miles Brennan because he was a 6-year senior and all this. And then I started to look through what Brian Kelly had the last decade at Notre Dame. More often than not, he had a mobile quarterback, from Everett Golson to Deshaun Kaiser to Ian Book. I mean, every guy he had was a guy who could move around. Now, Jack Cohen was the exception to the rule last year, but I'm putting him aside. Then you go look at what you just said with Mike Denbrock. The last 4 years at Cincinnati, he had Desmond Ridder. Desmond Ridder used his legs. He was mobile. He would get 400, 500 rushing yards a year. So when I started to look at that, I went, okay, now the Jaden Daniels transfer looks pretty good now, because you start to say, you look at what Jaden Daniels did last year at Arizona State in his years there. He uses his legs. Now, the numbers weren't pretty last year at Arizona State. 10 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. No one's going to write home about that, but they feel like he can be a game manager to get the ball into the hands of elite pass catchers like Kayshon Boutte, Jack Bash. They love this up-and-coming tight end, true freshman tight end in Mason Taylor. He's Jason Taylor's son. Maybe you heard of Jason Taylor, Hall of Famer in the NFL. They think he's going to be the next big thing. What do I know about Brian Kelly teams? They're always going to have good offensive lines, and they're going to get the ball to the tight end. So that's how I think this LSU team is going to be built. The offensive line, it's been a work in progress. I think they'll get better as the year goes along. They have a true freshman left tackle, and Will Campbell. But Brian Kelly, he may not do it immediately. They may go 8-4, 7-5 this season. I don't think they'll be bad enough to go 6-6. But this is the foundation. He's going to start building something. And I truly believe within the next 4 years, Brian Kelly's going to win a national championship at LSU. Why do I believe that? Because the last 3 guys all did it. Nick Saban did it. Les Miles did it. Ed Ogeron did it. Brian Kelly, I can't imagine his track record and winning a record that Brian Kelly wouldn't be one to be able to. All you got to do is once. You only got to break through 1 year where you beat Bama, you beat Georgia, and you win it all. But I think Brian Kelly is going to be the next guy to bring a championship to LSU. It's just going to take some time.
Yeah, I tell you what, there was nothing wrong with Notre Dame's offensive line recruiting and play or tight end play while he was there. I mean, they pumped out NFL guys. You're talking about a guy. I was going to hit on that. I know he talked about Taylor earlier in this offseason, and you talking about a guy had Travis Kelce. And to me, when you have tight ends, especially these guys that are 6'5", 6'6", and they can run and they can catch, it's a nightmare to cover those guys. And I think, we're seeing a reemergence big time of the tight end. And I mean, like you said, I think this Taylor kid, he's going to be a good one for you guys.
And they got 2. There's another guy named Cole Taylor, Kole. He's number 87. Mason Taylor's number 86. So when you're watching the tight ends rotate in and out at LSU, they're going to have 2 Taylors. Just make sure you keep track of which one's Cole Taylor, which one's Mason Taylor. But they're going to catch a ton of balls. But the crazy part was Brian Kelly said a few days ago in his press conference when talking about Mason Taylor, brought up Brock Bowers as a comparison. So just not saying he's going to be Brock Bowers, but said he's that type of athlete, that type of talent. And so when you look at what Georgia has, just an embarrassment of riches in their tight end room with Darnell Washington, with Brock Bowers, with Eric Gilbert, the former LSU tight end now over there. Man, it is just it's a bevy of riches for Georgia. But you're right. We're seeing more and more teams feature their tight ends a lot across the SEC. Cameron Latu last year at Alabama was a big go-to target for Bryce Young. So, yeah, we're kind of getting back into a little bit of the old school where the tight ends are playing a big factor.
And Chris, here are a couple of guys at running back, maybe somebody that nobody's heard a lot about at LSU that could be breakout performers.
John Emery is their guy that they really want to be the main running back, but he is still dealing with some academic issues. He had some issues last year. I shouldn't even say he's dealing with academic issues because he came out the other day and said his GPA is about a 3.8, 3.9. What's happening is the NCAA, once they make a ruling on something, it takes forever for them to clear you. We just saw this with Brew McCoy at Tennessee. I mean, he's transferred all around. He's been at Tennessee basically a majority of the offseason. He's been doing well, doing his coursework, going to practice, and it took him all the way up until, basically the week of their game against Ball State to finally clear Brew McCoy. The rumor is that John Emery will not be cleared for these first 2 weeks, that they want him to serve, I don't know, whatever it is, a full year plus suspension for his grade issues. So somewhere after the first 2 weeks, it sounds like John Emery will be eligible and get back out there. But the guy LSU is going to feature through the first couple of weeks is going to be Noah Cain. He's a transfer from Penn State. Was really, really productive at Penn State. And they believe that he can be the guy here with the combination of Armani Goodwin, who's another guy who can, he wears the number 22. He's a little short and stocky. People are comparing him to Clyde Edwards-Helaire because he can catch the ball out of the backfield, runs that wheel route, sneaks out of the backfield. Suddenly he's wide open, streaking up the field. So they're excited about those guys. But I think it's going to be a little bit of running back by committee these first couple weeks for LSU. And we'll see. We'll see if one of those guys can be very productive.
Okay, moving to the defensive side of the ball, here are a couple of names that, the audience might look out for. And do you think this team could see a resurgence on defense? I hope Matt House, to me, that was a home run hire. You're talking about a guy that's been the linebacker coach for the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs, they got after the quarterback. And so I'm expecting LSU with their athletes to really try to do that a good bit this season.
Yeah, Durante Jones was their one-year defensive coordinator last year. And if you watch that UCLA game, you're going, man, how's his defense with Derek Stingley Jr. and Eli Ricks and Mike Jones transfer from Clemson? All these pieces, why are they so bad? How is UCLA just running it down their throat and completing passes on them and the quarterback's running around? It took them around mid-season that they really made those adjustments. And if you go back and look at what LSU did at the back end of last season, Man, they gave Alabama all they could handle in that game in Tuscaloosa. That game was too close for comfort for Bama. They would have liked to have run away with that one. They played A&M much better. They just got so much better as a unit defensively. And what happened was Lane Kiffin pointed out some things to Ed Ogeron and said, look, there are just some simplistic changes you can make here. That defense will be much better. And they made them, and they got much better. I think, like you said, with Matt House coming in, bringing that NFL pedigree, they're going to bring that aggressive front, and they've got it in Ali Gay and B.J. Ojulari, two big-name guys who've been at LSU the last couple of years. They can rack up sacks like crazy as long as they can stay healthy. So, yeah, I think both those guys are going to be big sack artists for them on the outsides. And then up the middle, it starts with Big Mason Smith, number 0, who was really, really good last year as a freshman for them. So they have high hopes from him. They brought in Mekhi Wingo, who was all SEC freshman last year from Mizzou. He comes in via the transfer portal, so he'll help plug in that gap. Linebacker Mike Jones, like I said, the transfer from Clemson, he got a lot better down the stretch of last season once he had adjusted to the system. So they're hoping he can play a big role. And then that secondary, it's all new faces, really. It's a lot of guys coming in through the transfer portal, with Mekhi Garter coming over from ULL, Jarek Bernard-Converse, who was all Big 12 at Oklahoma State, Greg Brooks and Joe Fouché, who were both Louisiana guys but been starting the secondary at Arkansas. Now they could get to come back home and play for Louisiana, playing for LSU. So those are just some of the guys. They still have Jay Ward back there, who's a leader at safety, and Major Burns, who's a transfer from Georgia, who they're very excited about. So they got a lot of guys back there, man, and it's just going to be a work in progress. I'll be curious to see how the secondary responds, because Corey Raymond is gone now. He's the DB's coach at Florida now, and he's been that guy who's been that architect of that secondary. When you think of all the years of Morris Claiborne, Tyrann Mathieu, all these different first-round picks that LSU has had, the secondary has always been a strength back there with Corey Raymond, and now he's gone. So we'll be curious to see how they respond. But if it's like I said with Tennessee earlier, if they're getting that pressure up front from those defensive ends and that pass rush, it could shield a lot of your deficiencies in the secondary.
Sure. And hey, looking ahead of this FSU game Sunday night, that's going to be the primetime game in New Orleans. I had a chance to see FSU a little bit. I know Jordan Travis, he really upped the quarterback for FSU. He's a big kid. He really played well for them down the stretch last year. Johnny Wilson, their big time, he's 6'7", about 230-pound wide receiver. He's questionable for the game. Their starting center, Darius Washington, left in the first half last season. Their best cornerback, Omarion Cooper, he didn't play last week, is expected to play against LSU. So, I mean, what's your thoughts on this game? I mean, I think it's got the potential to be a pretty good ball game. But what's your thoughts? How do you think this turns out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a close ball game. By the way, I think that one of their linebackers, Amari Gaynor, he got hurt last week. He's been ruled out of this game. So, it's more depth that they're going to be missing back there. The running ability is interesting of Jordan Travis. I know Brian Kelly's brought up their true freshman linebacker that they signed, Harold Perkins, that, one of the things that they're kind of working him into the scheme of is being that guy to just shadow the quarterback when he's in there. They think he's going to be a guy that can play that spy position on Jordan Travis and just say, hey, wherever he goes, you go follow him and go try to hit him. So that will be an interesting thing to watch. But yeah, I think this one's close. I mean, I talk with a lot of friends who are diehard LSU fans, and they think LSU is going to run away with this one. Florida State sucks. They've been down the last couple of years. We're going to stick it to them. Yeah, but Mike Norvell is a desperate man. He's basically coaching for his job this year. And so he can't afford to lose this one. This is a big one that I feel like, he's been at Florida State. He's, been developing a system there the last couple of years. Brian Kelly just got to LSU. You can't let the new guy walk in with a bunch of transfer portal guys and beat you. It is going to be basically a home game for LSU. It is being played in the New Orleans Superdome. And I wish this was a home and home on campuses rather than being played on off-campus venues. But Florida State fans, I've heard, are all making this trip. That, look, who don't want to go spend a holiday weekend in New Orleans for 3-4 days? So a lot of folks are coming over from Tallahassee. Florida State will have their fan base there as well. But LSU's been about around a field goal favorite in this one, and that's where I would probably put it. I would say LSU wins 24-21. They're working in a new field goal kicker in Damian Ramos, I believe is his name. And LSU's been so accustomed to having the Cade Yorks and all these automatic field goal kickers that they might finally have a guy who misses a field goal from time to time. But I think LSU wins by a field goal. 24-21 is my prediction, but I think it's close all the way out.
Okay. Hey, I got there's a couple of games in the SEC. Of course, Utah State and Alabama. Alabama's favored by, I think, 40-something points. But that Logan Bonner kid at Utah State, he can chunk it around. And they have a wide receiver, Justin McGriff. He's 6'6", 215 pounds. And Alabama's breaking in some new cornerbacks. And Nick Saban's even talked about he's a little concerned about that spot. So, I'm not predicting Utah State to beat them or anything, but they could hang around in that game for a little bit. But the thing last week that I noticed with Utah State, they were giving up a lot of pressure from UConn. And that guy, Will Anderson.
Yeah.
I mean, dude. I mean, I don't know why he wasn't in the Heisman finalist last year. And some people even said he was the best player. To me, he's the best player in the country.
We could talk about Logan Bonner throwing the football, but he can't throw the football if he can't get the ball out of his hands. And he's going to be welcomed very quickly by Mr. Will Anderson, of course, Dallas Turner, and all those pass rushing fools they got back there. It's absolutely ridiculous. I'm excited to see big number 91 up front for Alabama, Jaheim Otis. I know it's going to be him with DJ Dale, but he's a true freshman coming in that Nick Saban's raved about. I just know this. When Nick Saban raves about a true freshman, you better watch out for that guy because that means that dude can play. On the offensive side of the ball, I've had some questions this offseason about Bryce Young and his pass catchers. Look, you lose a John Mechie, you lose a Jameson Williams. You don't just automatically replace those guys. Now, Bama has in recent years. They found that guy very quickly. From Jerry Jeudy to Calvin Ridley to, on and on and on the list, they've always had that guy. Right now, they don't have that guy. Who's the go-to guy? Some people make a case for Jermaine Burton coming over from Georgia. He's a fine player, but he ain't Mechie or Jameson Williams. Kobe Prentice is a guy that has worked himself in as a starter already as a true freshman. And Saban's mentioned his name 3-4 times in just the past week. That tells me right there, watch that kid. Watch number 80 for Alabama because I think he's going to have a good chance. I'll be interested to see the transfer from Louisville, Tyler Harrell in there. And then, of course, the two kids who've been around for a little while, and Ja'Cory Brooks and Trayshawn Holden. Look, when the bright lights came on in the national championship and those kids were asked to step up, they had their drops, they had their missteps, but I know they've worked all offseason with Bryce Young, so maybe those kids are ready to step up to the plate and be the big-time playmakers. But the only other concern for me for Alabama, I love Jahmyr Gibbs at running back. I think he's set for a prime year, but how good is that offensive line? Just looking at recent years of Alabama O-lines, this might be the weakest. When you have to go to Vanderbilt to go get a left tackle, that ain't a good thing. I know the transfer portal is a good thing, but Tyler Steen, no offense to him, he shouldn't be starting for Alabama, but he is. They had some issues trying to figure out his Darian Delcourt. We know Emil Ekiyor was a little inconsistent last year, but I think they're going to be fine as the season goes along. And obviously the schedule sets up well for them. I don't think Utah State will have any, they're not going to, it's not like they're going to be getting tons of pressure on Alabama, but the secondary thing does intrigue me as well, man. When, I know Kool-Aid McKinstry's got one of those cornerback spots locked down, but who's going to be that other spot? Is it Terrion Arnold? Is it Kyrie Jackson? And then ultimately, when does Eli Ricks get, I don't know, he's been banged up and they've been working him in and he was having some issues, understand the system. How quickly does Eli Ricks become the guy that he was at LSU? We're going to see as the year goes along.
And Chris, you're exactly right. When Coach Saban, I remember a couple of years ago, it was Josh Jacobs that he was talking about. When Coach Saban talks about you, you're a player, period. A couple of games that we got a good slate in the SEC this weekend. I mean, of course, Oregon and Georgia. Bo Nix meets Georgia again. Bo Nix has never had any luck against the Bulldog defense, and I expect that to continue. Dan Lanning, former defensive coordinator at Georgia, he also returns. That game is being played in Atlanta, which that's basically a home game for Georgia. You look at Cincinnati at Arkansas, that has the potential to be a pretty good game. Memphis and Mississippi State, potential to be a pretty good game. There's one game, though, that I think could be potentially a trouble spot, and that's Troy at Ole Miss. This Troy team, they can get after the quarterback, and they have some veteran, salty players on defense. Gunnar Watson there at quarterback. Garrett Dogue is another guy that transferred in. Veteran receivers, pretty good offensive line, although they had trouble running the ball last year. I think they ran for less than 100 yards a game. But then they also had Chip Lindsey, and Chip Lindsey, while he was the OC at Auburn, they didn't run the ball very well after Kerryon Johnson departed. So, John Summerall, new head coach. I think this game could be a pretty good ball game. What you take?
I think it's an interesting one. And, Ole Miss is around a 3-touchdown favorite, depending on what sports book you're looking at. But the thing is, I don't know what Ole Miss is. Like, they've brought in so many pieces through the transfer portal. I know everybody's hopeful that Jackson Dart is going to be the guy. They haven't named a starting quarterback as of yet. I think the schedule sets up well. If you look at the first 4 weeks of the season, they play Troy, Central Arkansas, at Georgia Tech, and Tulsa. Ole Miss should have enough talent to win all 4 of these games. The question is it going to be Luke Altmaier or is it going to be Jackson Dart? Well, if you watch the spring game, both guys didn't look very good at all. And then throughout fall camp, it's been kind of neck and neck. One guy outperforms the other guy. And just on Saturday, when I thought I kept hearing nothing but positive things about Jackson Dart, and I thought they were ready to announce him as a starter, I see the numbers come out of Saturday's scrimmage where Jackson Dart is 17 for 26 for 200 yards with a touchdown and an interception. And then I see Luke Altmaier was 20 for 23, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. I'm like, well, Altmaier looks on paper like the safer play here. So I think that's what Lane Kiffin is looking at. I think he thinks Altmaier's the safe play. Like, if I got to win games with Luke Altmaier, we can tailor the game plan to him where he's not going to lose us the game. But Jackson Dart's got the big play mentality. Jackson Dart's going to take those shots down the field. And so that's the kind where it's like kind of high risk, high reward. If you go with Jackson Dart, man, this dude's a gamer. He might beat some of these teams this year you're not supposed to beat. So I think the way the schedule sets up, play them both against Troy. Like you said, though, if that pass rush from Troy is getting after him, what do? Do they make the change quarterback? Do they play the safe play with Luke Altmaier? I think it starts with the run game. The run game at Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin has been one of the most underrated pieces of his offense. Everybody, I think they led the league in yards per carry last year. Ole Miss did. Nobody even talks about that because they were so good with Jerry Ely and Snoop Connor. Well, now both those guys are gone. They got 2 new guys. Zach Evans, a transfer from TCU, Ulysses Bentley from SMU. I'll be curious to see how good Zach Evans is. Heard nothing but rave reviews about this kid throughout his high school years. Had some issues getting into with his coaches. LSU, Georgia were on his radar at one point. Ends up at TCU, did all the right things there, and now he's ready to be a breakout player in the SEC a couple years later. And I think he's going to have a monster year there at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is going to run the football a lot, particularly with the question marks at quarterback.
Yeah, and I'm going to go outside the SEC with this Notre Dame at Ohio State matchup. Everybody's pretty high on Ohio State, and rightfully so. C.J. Stroud. I mean, they're going to have, they got great athletes all over the field. I mean, but that's Notre Dame's getting no respect here, and then Notre Dame's still got some pretty good players. I mean, how do you see this thing shaking out? Do you think Ohio State just blows them out?
It's going to be interesting. Like, Ohio State is C.J. Stroud's getting all the roses, Travion Henderson getting all the roses, and they were fantastic last year. But I don't know why. I just watched. They were replaying on TV yesterday, and it was a replay of the Michigan game. And I'm like, man, those guys are still young, though. Like, am I ready to bank on Ohio State running through an undefeated season and all this? This weekend will be telling, because Notre Dame is very talented. They do have a lot of pieces, but when it comes to coaching, I think Ryan Day has stepped up to the plate. I think he is a big game coach. I have some big question marks about Marcus Freeman. I like Marcus Freeman a lot as an assistant coach. I don't know if I like him yet as a head coach. And getting the Notre Dame job, man, I just wish this had been flipped. I wish it would have been Luke Fickell leaves, takes the Notre Dame job. Marcus Freeman slides in as a head coach at Cincinnati, coaches a couple years at Cincinnati, builds them up, keeps the momentum going there, and then he gets his big boy job. I don't know if Marcus Freeman's ready for this job. We saw him in the bowl game. People forget he coached the bowl game where they lost, blew the lead against Oklahoma State, lost that one, so he's 0-1 technically as a coach. But I think this game he's just stepping into a big doghouse where it's a lose-lose situation. I think Ohio State is going to run away with this one. And if they do, I think the topic on Monday, Matt, is going to be, if Alabama looks kind of whatever against Utah State, I think there will be going to be some pollsters trying to make the case that Ohio State deserves to jump Alabama in the polls and put them as the number one team if they win convincingly over Notre Dame.
Sure, sure. And I was gonna ask you. I asked you before we got on. I mean, looking in the SEC or anywhere else, I mean, does Georgia State have a shot against South Carolina? I mean, I know Georgia State, had some pretty good players. I mean, who out there do you see? What's your upset of the week?
Yeah, I got asked this the other day by somebody just looking at the game specifically in the SEC this weekend. If we're talking like actual upset, Florida is an underdog at home against Utah. So the odds makers say Florida's supposed to lose that one. Utah is a very good team led by Cam Rising. They're number 7 in the country, and that's a hostile environment they're going down into in the swamp. And I think it's a game Florida maybe can win, but again, they're the underdog. So if Florida wins that game, it won't be it would be an upset technically for Florida to win it, but it wouldn't surprise me to put it that way. But if anybody's maybe on upset alert, I think Memphis could give Mississippi State a game like they did a year ago. They got the benefit of a call. Remember the ball where it looked like it was down, the guy picked it up and ran it back, and there were no flags or anything, and we're all looking at it going, what? Georgia State's a dangerous matchup for South Carolina, certainly to start the season. That's a really good team, and Spencer Rattler was not all impressive to me in the spring game. Now, I talked to him at the Manning Passing Academy. He told me we didn't have any of our pieces. A lot of our guys in the transfer portal weren't here yet. We had some guys that were out with injuries and all this. So he said, you didn't see our full complement of the offense, but all eyes are going to be on Spencer Rattler at South Carolina. If he comes out and looks mediocre and they're playing a close game week 1 against Georgia State, man, there's going to be a lot of people jumping off the Shane Beamer, Spencer Rattler, South Carolina bandwagon after week 1. So that is an interesting one. I'll keep an eye on that. But the one that a lot of people keep bringing up is Troy. Because, again, Ole Miss has so many unknowns. We don't know what they are. And then Cincinnati maybe against Arkansas. I don't think many people are picking Arkansas to lose that one because they're at home. Look, we saw week 2 a year ago how Arkansas showed up against Texas in that game in Fayetteville. That place was rocking. People are expecting the same. Fayetteville's going to show up and show out. And Cincinnati, man, they better grab some early momentum because if not, it feels like one that Arkansas could pull away with.
Yeah, man. And hitting on South Carolina, nobody talked about them last year, and it seems like they've been the talk of the league, this year. So that Georgia State team, that head coach especially, he gets his boys motivated for big games. So they're going to play hard, and they play a different style of football. They like to pound it and pound it and pound it. So and they got an athletic quarterback, and so we'll see what happens there. And Cincinnati, I will say one thing about Cincinnati under Luke Fickell. Them in Arkansas under Sam Pittman, those two football teams play hard. They play hard, and even watching them against Bama last year, they lost, but they played hard, and that you'll never see a lack of effort with that football team under Luke Fickell. But Chris, man, I know we ran about almost 40 minutes here, buddy, and I really appreciate your time and your expertise. And if you want to mention where your work can be seen or social media posts, just let my audience know.
Yeah, just lockedonsec.com is the easiest place, or just go to lockedonsec on YouTube. We do the video version of the show now, and having some great success. Got a lot of people watching the show and listening to the show now, and we have some guests throughout the year. We love getting Lynn Scarborough from Lindy Sports on to talk football all the time. And as you know, with Lynn, you can ask him 2 questions and he'll go on for 45 minutes, but that's what we love about him. He's a great guy with the wealth of knowledge. But we've had some players on throughout the offseason as well, and we're ready to go now, man. It's full talk in SEC football. And, like I said, to me, the big storyline is, will the SEC get 2 teams into the playoff this year? I just don't see it. I don't think it's going to happen again. But who knows? If Georgia and Alabama run the table again, they'll both be back in there.
Who's your 4 team? Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I got Alabama winning the SEC, so they're in. I got Ohio State winning the Big Ten. They're in. I've got Clemson winning the ACC. I got Clemson back in. Remember Clemson? Everybody forgot about Clemson because they lost 3 games and suddenly, they're terrible. No, Clemson's back. Their defense is legit. I think if DJ Uwe, however you say his name, I think if he plays well this year, he had a down year last year. If he can play well this year, quarterback, I think Clemson's in. So who's that 4th team? I'm taking Baylor. I think Baylor wins the Big 12 again this year. Now, they slipped up. They lost to TCU last year, and that was their second loss. Baylor just had one loss as the Big 12 champion last year. I thought they maybe could have had an argument to get in over Georgia maybe. So this will be interesting to see. But right now, I'm going with Alabama as the SEC champ, Ohio State as the Big 10 champ, Clemson as the ACC champ, and then going with Baylor as the Big 12 champ. And guess what? Pac-12 champ, you're left out again.
I won't say it on that. I think Utah I think USC could come out of nowhere with the talent they have in Lincoln.
It's too early. It's too early. That team was so bad last year. People forget they gave up 63 points to UCLA down the stretch of last year. Woo. Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams can't fix that in one offseason. So yeah, they'll be better. Don't get me wrong. They'll win some games, but I think that's a rebuilding there for USC.
All right, man. Well, hey, Chris, appreciate your time, brother. We'll talk to you soon, man.
Awesome, man. Thanks.
Yep.